Hello, my name's Simon. Welcome to the Simply Electric Guitar DVD. Today we'll be covering a lot about the electric guitar, from choosing your first electric guitar to covering all the playing basics. Any experience you have on the acoustic guitar will be helpful, but it's not necessary in your quest to become a great electric guitar player. So let's plug in, tune up and get started. Choosing your first electric guitar is the most important choice you'll make. There are hundreds of models out there and it's easy to get confused. So make a list of the players you like, what guitars they're playing and the sounds they're getting. This is going to help you get closer to the sounds that you'll want to get. Now we're going to talk about two of the main models of guitars out there. The first guitar I'm going to show you today is the Fender Stratocaster. This is probably the single most popular guitar on the planet. It could be identified with artists such as Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan, and more contemporary artists such as the Red Hot Chili Peppers. What makes this guitar distinctive is the three single coil pickups here, and it also comes with a vibrato arm, sometimes referred to as the whammy bar. I'll demonstrate some of the sounds that you can get from a Fender Stratocaster guitar. The next guitar I'm going to talk to you today about is the Gibson Les Paul guitar. This is a lot different from the Fender Stratocaster guitar. What makes it so different is the pickups. It has two humbucker style pickups, which are twice as powerful generally as the single coils on the Fender Stratocaster. What is also different about this guitar is the scale length. It is slightly shorter, so it makes it a little bit easier to play, bending, that kind of thing. What is also different about this guitar is it has two separate controls, one for each pickup. So let me play the Gibson Les Paul and you can hear the difference a bit. If you're just starting out on electric guitar, I would recommend a starter pack like this one. It comes with everything you need to get started. The guitar, of course, a small practice amp, a lead, a strap, spare strings, and in some case a tuner, so you can tune up really quickly. It's time to learn the working parts of an electric guitar. We'll start at the top here. This is called the headstock. From here you will tune your guitar and hopefully keep it in tune. These are called machine heads or tuning pegs. At the end of the headstock here is a little but important part of the guitar called the nut. This is pretty important because it plays a big part in how easy your guitar is to play. This is the neck. This is where you play your guitar. At the front of the neck are these little vertical metal bars called frets. This is the body. This is where the pickups are mounted. This is the scratch plate. The role of the scratch plate here is to hold in place the pickups. These are the pickups, and that's what they do. They pick up the sound of the vibrating guitar strings, very much like a microphone amplifies the singing voice, and sends these vibrations through to your guitar amplifier. The pickup nearest the neck is called a neck pickup. It gives a more mellow sound. Okay. The middle pickup has a nice chiming quality, almost like that of an acoustic guitar. The pickup nearest the bridge sounds more harsh, a good sound for a more aggressive tone. You have here your guitar controls, your volume and tone control switches. The most important control on your electric guitar is the volume control. This controls the amount of volume from your guitar to the amplifier. The tone controls are generally set to full on your guitar. You have the best control of your tone from the amplifier. However, feel free to experiment with these. The switch here is called a pickup selector switch. It allows you to change between pickups. This is called the input jack. this is where you'll plug in your guitar lead or cable and connect it to your amplifier. The bridge here is responsible for keeping your guitar in tune. If you have problems keeping your guitar in tune, then a qualified and experienced guitar repairman may need to adjust the bridge accordingly. These are the strings. From high to low, your strings are E, B, G, D, A, E. You can remember this really easily by remembering the simple phrase, Easter bunny goes dancing at Easter. This is a guitar amplifier. The guitar amplifier picks up the signal from your guitar via a guitar cable and produces the sound from your guitar. From the amplifier, you are able to adjust the sound of your guitar via the controls on your amplifier, such as treble, which controls your treble, bass, which controls the amount of bass in your sound, and the gain control, which is used to control the amount of distortion in your sound. You'll soon discover that guitar amplifiers are built in many shapes and sizes. Start with a small practice amp. This way you'll learn how to control your sound. At this stage, you may find using a larger amp a little daunting. Now we're going to talk about tuning your guitar. It's relatively easy to keep your guitar in tune these days with the aid of an electric tuner. You plug your guitar into the tuner marked IN. It's easy to remember. IN stands for instrument. The tuner will pick up the vibrations of the string with your guitar volume turned up full. When there's no movement on the tuning meter, you'll know that your guitar string is in tune. If you don't have an electric tuner, it's still relatively easy to learn to tune, but you'll need a reference point, one of these, a tuning fork. You'll tune your A string to this tuning fork and then tune your guitar like I'm going to show you right now. Once you have your A string in tune, you then fret the note on the 5th fret A string. From here, you'll play this note, which is a D note, and then you will tune your D string, this one here, to that note, like that. Once that's in tune, you fret the G note on the 5th fret of the D string and tune your open G string. And you can see that they are pretty much in tune. Moving on to the G string, you want to tune the B string to the G string, so this time we have to move our finger to the 4th fret here on the G string, that's the B note. From there we're going to tune the open B string. When we're tuning the high E string, we'll want to fret the E note right here on the 5th fret of the B string, and we're going to tune the open E string, the high E, to that note. Once that's done, we're going to tune the low E with the high E, and from there your guitar's in tune. Once you have your electric guitar, you need to take care of it. That's relatively easy. When you're not playing it, keep it in its case or on a stand, and make sure that you restring it regularly. When we're learning the electric guitar, it's sometimes very easy to forget that it takes 2 hands to play the guitar. Right now I want to talk a little bit about holding the pick correctly. I hold the pick between the thumb and the 1st finger. I don't hold it so tight that it creates unnecessary tension in my shoulder, but I hold it firmly so I don't drop it. It's also very important not to show too much pick to the strings. That way you can stay very close to the strings and have more control over your picking technique. Now we're going to do some simple picking exercises on the open strings. I'll be naming the strings as we go, so you'll be able to keep up and hopefully play along. I'll be picking up and down all the time. I'll be starting on the high E string here. Now the B string. Now the G string. Moving on to the D string. A string. And finally, the low E string. There's also another way you can attack the strings, and that is using your pick in combination with the second finger here. I'll show you how you do that. This is a particularly useful technique should you ever drop your plectrum. And some very important riffs over time have been done with just fingers, like this one. Right now we're going to look at some techniques to help you with this, your fretting hand, your left hand. What we're going to do is some simple exercises that will help you develop some technique for picking notes and fretting them correctly on the neck. This is the 3-4 exercise, meaning we're going to do this at the 3rd and 4th fret. And first of all, I'll be playing this with the 1st and 2nd finger. To fret correctly, you'll need to put your fingertip right here, just behind the fret. If you get it on the fret, you'll get this sound, which you don't want. So just behind the fret is the perfect place to put your finger. So we're going to put our first finger on the 3rd fret here and play that note. Then we're going to put our 2nd finger on the 4th fret and play the note there on the 4th fret. I'll do that once more. Now when you're doing this, it's really important not to lift your finger after you've used it. You don't want to be doing this. That's poor technique. So I'm going to be repeating this exercise up all of the strings. Now when you come back, it'll just be the reverse of what you played, starting on the 4th fret here with your 2nd finger, and your 3rd fret here has your 1st finger on it. This is coming backwards. Now we're going to repeat the same exercise with your 3rd and 4th finger. You may have noticed that these exercises, when performed with the 3rd and 4th finger, are significantly harder. That's to be expected because they're weaker. Use these as a great warm-up exercise, but make sure when you're doing these to keep your fingers as close as possible to the guitar neck. When you're learning the electric guitar, there's no doubt you'll come across something called guitar tab or guitar tablature. This is the industry standard in guitar notation. The main difference is it has 6 lines as opposed to the standard notation, which has 5. Now the important points about guitar tab to remember are this. It has 6 lines, 1 for each string of the guitar. The numbers on the tab represent the fret numbers that you're playing. Also, it's a good point to remember that you read this from left to right, as in standard music. Also, the best way to view guitar tab is as if you're looking over the guitar, meaning your top string E is at the top of the page. That way you'll be able to see where you are on the guitar tab. Now I'm going to do exercise 3 and 4, which I've just done, and you'll see the tab appear on the screen right next to me. you're viewing chords on the tab, you'll see that they are stacked, meaning you play these notes at the same time. Now I'm going to play an E major chord, and that will also appear on the screen next to me in tab. To become accomplished on the electric guitar, you'll need a thorough knowledge of chords and scales, and today we're going to discuss a little of both. Now, chords are notes played together, and they're named after the first note of the chord. Today I'm going to show you E, A and D, and we're going to move on to also the C, add 9 and the G chord. Now, it's not going to be possible for me to show you all the chords today, so I suggest you go to your local music store and pick up a chord directory. Now, the first 3 chords I'm going to show you today are E, D and A. I'll be showing you these step by step, so it should be pretty easy to play along. To play the E chord, put your first finger on the first fret G string. Now make sure you have your fingers just behind the fret. If you have them too far back, you may find this harder to move your other fingers into position. Also, when you put your fingers on the neck, they should look like they're growing out of the fingerboard. If you have them too flat, you're going to interfere with the sound of the other strings. So, first finger behind the first fret on the G string. Your second finger should be on the second fret, A string. Your third finger should be right under that on the second fret of the D string. Now, when you play this chord, you use the open E string and also the open B and E string here. You play these all together and it should sound something like this. The next chord I'll show you is the D chord. To play this, we put our first finger on the second fret of the G string, right here. Our second finger goes on the second fret of the high E string, and our third finger goes on the third fret of the B string. Now for this chord, we don't need the low E or the A string, so we only play from the open D string, this one here. And your D chord should sound like this. Now the 2 chords I just played for you are called open string chords. This is because they rely on the open strings for their sound. The D chord here, there's the D string, and the E chord, there's the E string. Now the chord I'm going to show you next is the A chord. Now there's 2 ways to play this chord. The first way is the more traditional fingering. To do this, put your first finger behind the second fret on the G string. Then put your second finger behind the second fret of the D string. Now put your third finger behind the second fret of the B string. And play this chord from the open A. So we don't need the low open E, but you will need the high open E. Now the second fingering I'm going to show you is more useful for rock. This is played with just the one finger. I'll show you how you do this. Put your first finger across the second fret, across the D, the G and the B strings there. We don't want the high E. If you play that one, it will make it an A6th. So to play this chord, we play again just from the open A, like this. This fingering is particularly useful because it liberates the other fingers. And you'll be able to use this later on when we cover blues patterns. When you're learning your first chords, it's important to be able to play clearly. Now, all hands are not the same size, but guitars are. So you may find that you'll need to make certain adjustments with your fingers to get a clear sound. What you don't want is this. You can adjust your hand accordingly, just a few millimeters that way. And again, make sure your fingers look like they're growing out of the fingerboard. Now I'm going to show you 2 more chords, the G and the C add 9 chord. Now to play the G chord, put your first finger behind the second fret of the A string. Your second finger goes behind the third fret of the low E string. Your third finger goes behind the B string, third fret, and your fourth finger goes behind the third fret of the high E string. And for this chord, the D and the G string are both open. To play the C add 9, place your first finger behind the second fret of the D string. Your second finger goes behind the third fret of the A string. Your third finger goes behind the third fret of the B string. And your fourth finger is just under that on the third fret of the high E string. Now for this chord, you will also need the sound of the open G string, but you will not need the low E string. It should sound like this. You'll find changing from the C add 9 to the G chord relatively easy. These chords are very in the band such as AC/DC. Now we're going to move on to scales. Scales are important, more important to the electric guitar than the acoustic guitar, because on the electric guitar, as well as playing chords, we play riffs. Now for those of you who don't know what a riff is simply a repeated musical phrase. Here's an example. The first scale I'm going to show you today is the C major scale. Now the major scale should be seen as your musical alphabet, so it's important to understand this and get it right. So I'll show you step by step how to play the C major scale. We're going to start on the third fret of the A string. Now we're going to use our second finger to play this note. The second note we're going to play is on the fifth fret of the A string, and we're going to play that note with our fourth finger. Now moving on to the D string, we're going to play the E note here on the second fret of the D string with our first finger. The next note is played on the third fret of the D string, and that's the F note. The next note we're playing is played with the fourth finger on the fifth fret of the D string, and that is the G note. The last three notes we're going to play are on the G string. We're going to start on the second fret of the G string. This is your A note. Now we're going to play the B note, which is on the fourth fret of the G string, and finishing on the C, octave C here, on the fifth fret of the G string. Now I'll play that scale all the way through slowly and tell you the notes as we go. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Now the key of the scale is determined by the first note. So we've just played the C major scale. We started from the C there. Now because this scale has no open strings, it is now a movable scale. So we can take this form just about anywhere on the neck and play a major scale. For example, if I took this up to the 7th fret, that would be the E note there. We would play the same form, and that would become the E major scale. I could also take this to the 3rd fret of the low E string, play the same sequence of notes that we've just played here. Now I'll name the notes of the G major scale here so you can play along. That's the G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Now the sharp is a note that occurs between two natural notes, meaning it has neither a sharp nor a flat in front of it. Now I'm going to show you how to play the A major scale. To play this scale, we start at the 5th fret on the low E string. We use our second finger to play this note, which is the A note. The next note we play is the B note, located on the 7th fret of the E string. We're moving up to the A string now, where we play with our first finger the 4th fret. That's the C sharp. The next note is the D, that's played with the second finger. Still on the A string, we play the E note, which is on the 7th fret. Play that note with the 4th finger. Moving up to the D string, we play the note here, which is the F sharp, with our first finger on the 4th fret of the D string. The next note we play is the G sharp on the 4th fret of the D string. And the last note for this scale is octave A, which is on the 7th fret of the D string. And I'll play that scale forwards and backwards for you. Now we're going to look at scales played with the metronome. A metronome is a simple electronic device used by musicians to practice keeping in time. We can set the metronome to varying tempos, from fast to slow to very fast. Now I'm going to be playing the C major scale at 2 tempos. One's at 80 beats a minute and the other one is at 100 beats a minute. Now I'm going to reset the metronome to 100 beats a minute and play the same scale. Now we're going to talk about the pentatonic minor scale. This scale is probably the most widely used scale in rock music. It's called the pentatonic scale because it has 5 tones, as opposed to the major scale, which has 7 tones. And the first position we're going to learn is the A minor pentatonic scale. I'm going to run through this a note at a time so you can keep up. We're going to be starting at the 5th fret on the low E string. The next note we're going to play is the C on the low E string at the 8th fret. You play that note with your 4th finger. The next note we're going to play is the D note, which is played on the 5th fret of the A string. The next note is the E, played on the 7th fret of the A string. The next note is the G note, which is played on the 5th fret of the D string. The next note is the A note, which is played on the 7th fret of the D string. On the G string, we play 2 notes, one on the 5th fret, one on the 7th fret. That is the C and the D note. The next notes we play are on the B string at the 5th fret. That's the E note. The next note is the G note, played on the 8th fret this time. It's played with the 4th finger. And once again, on the high E string, we play the 5th fret, A, and on the 8th fret, C. Now you may have noticed that there's more than 5 tones there, but they're simply repeated. A, C, D, E, G. A, C, D, E, G, A, C. It's useful to think of this scale as a box shape under your fingers. That's a great way to remember this visually when you're trying to learn this. I'll play it for you a couple of times. Once you've learnt this scale, it's movable. There's no open strings in this scale, so you can take it up to or down to any key on the guitar neck. For instance, up to E. I played the same shape, but different notes. I could take this, for instance, down to the G note. That makes that the G minor pentatonic. Now we're going to talk about bar chords and power chords. Now there's a few points to remember with bar chords. That is, they're different from open chords because they don't rely on any open strings. They're called bar chords because we use our first finger to bar across all 6 strings. Now, the bad news is that these are harder to play than open chords. The good news is there's less shapes to remember. So, also, there's 2 types of bar chords to remember. One based on the E chord shape, which you've learned, and one based on the A chord shape. Now, we're going to cover both today. So, let's move on to bar chords based on the 6th string. To play bar chords based on the 6th string, we're going to have to reconfigure the fingering for the E major chord. You learnt this before by playing it like this. This time we're going to play the same notes but with different fingers. We're going to place our 2nd finger on the 1st fret of the G string. We're going to place our 3rd finger on the 2nd fret of the A string, and we're going to place our 4th finger on the 2nd fret of the D string. So we've got the same notes, different fingers. It's going to feel a little strange. Now we can move this shape up. Then we place our 1st finger across all 6 strings. That is now the F major chord, because that's your root note there, or your tonic, the F note. So we've essentially taken this chord to here. From this shape, it's relatively easy to learn the rest of the chord shapes. To play the F minor chord, we simply take off the 2nd finger off the G string. To play the 7th chord, we play basically the same shape as the major chord, but we remove our 4th finger from the D string. That's the 7th chord. To make this a minor 7th, we take off our 2nd finger, and this is probably the hardest chord to learn because the 1st finger is holding down most of the strings. Then we have the F minor 7. Again, there's the F, that's your root note. Now these chords are movable, so you could take any one of these shapes up to the notes on the E string, so it's important to learn all of the notes on the E string to be able to play all of the chords based on the E string. For example, we take the minor shape up to the G, and that's a G minor. Now the 2nd set of bar chords is based on the A shape. Now the A shape I'm talking about is the 1st A shape we learnt today, but the modified one, the one with 1 finger. So basically we're going to play this shape with the 3rd finger, and we're going to take this shape, move it up, and put our 1st finger on this note here, which is the B flat. So we've taken that A shape up to B flat. To make this into a minor chord, we play the A minor shape. I'll go through that. That is the 2nd finger on the 1st fret of the B string, and you have your 3rd finger on the 2nd fret of the D string, and you have your 4th finger on the 2nd fret of the G string, A minor. We move that shape up, but this time we put our 1st finger along just the 5 from the 5 strings there. And to make this into a minor 7th chord, we simply take off our 4th finger. There's your B flat minor chord. Again, these are movable. Now it's important to learn both shapes, because if you knew just one, for example, say G minor to C minor, and you only knew this on the E chord, the E shape here, you would be going like this, which is fairly clumsy because you're moving up and down. Because we've learnt both sets, we can now go from G minor here to C minor, which is just under it here. Now once you've learnt bar chords, you've basically learnt power chords, because power chords are just the first two notes of a bar chord shape. There. If we look at a G major bar chord here, you've essentially got the shape of a power chord right here. And that is also the same for the shapes you've learnt on the A string. Now we're going to look at the 12-bar blues. Now the 12-bar blues is 12 bars of music, and after those 12 bars are completed, it repeats the cycle. Now the 12-bar we're going to look at today is in the key of E, and the 12-bar progression is essentially a 1-4-5 progression, meaning that the corresponding chords are taken from the corresponding notes of that major scale. So if it's in the key of E, we're going to take the chords from the key of E, meaning we're going to take it from the E major scale. I'll show you those chords right now. 1 is E. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 is A. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's B. So we have the three chords we need to complete 12 bars in the key of E. That's E, A, and B. Now I'm going to show you how to play the first 4 bars of a 12-bar blues in the key of E. Now we're going to play this based on the E major chord we learnt before. However, we're going to play this in a slightly different fashion, meaning we only really need 2 strings to play this measure of music. We're going to start with our first finger on the 2nd fret of the A string. We play that together with the open E string. Now we play that twice. The next part, we move a 3rd finger up to the 4th fret. That's a C sharp note on the A string. We play that twice. Next, we move our 4th finger up to the 5th fret. That's a D note on the 5th fret of the A string, and we play that twice. To complete the first bar, we play the 4th fret along with the open E, 4th fret of the A string. So what I've just played is this. That's how you play the first 4 bars in the key of E. I'll play those for you right now. Now while you're playing this, it's important to keep your first finger anchored. And again, as we discussed earlier in the DVD, we need to keep our fingers as close as possible to the strings. I'm going to play that again. Now the next 2 bars we're going to play in A. That's your 2nd chord, remember? 1, 2, 3, 4, the A section. We're going to play essentially the same thing based on the 2nd version of the A major chord we learnt earlier today, and that is we're going to play this with our first finger on the E note, the second fret of the D string. We're going to play that along with the open A string twice. And again, for the second part of this, we're going to move a third finger to the fourth fret, that's the F sharp note, and we'll play that twice along with, again, the open A string. Next, we're going to move our fourth finger up to the G note here on the fifth fret of the D note, the D string, beg your pardon there, and we're going to play that twice. Finishing up, we're going to bring our third finger back to the fourth fret of the D string, that's the F sharp note, and play that along with the open A string. So we're going to play that, 2 bars of that. I'll play that for you right now. Now the next 2 bars are simply a repeat of what you played first. That's the E section here. Now the last chord we're going to play is a B7. And for those of you who don't know a B7 chord, I'll just run through that for you now. Your first finger will be on the first fret D string. Your second finger is on the B note, which is on the second fret of the A string. Your third finger is on the second fret of the G string. And your fourth finger finally is on the second fret of the E string. And the B string is left open there. So it's going to be a nice contrast to the previous sections we just played. We're going to play that. 1 bar of this. Then we're going to play 1 bar of A. Then 1 bar of E. Finishing with 1 bar of the B7 chord. And the whole thing then starts again. Now I'm going to play 12 bars for you. 12 bar in the key of E. Now, some good examples of 12 bars over the years are, of course, Chuck Berry's Johnny Be Good, Bill Haley's Rock Around the Clock, and probably more recently what comes to mind is the song Teenagers by My Chemical Romance. There are certainly many variations of the 12-bar blues, and now we'll be looking at a minor blues. We'll be looking at this in the key of A. For the A minor chord, you have your first finger on the first fret of the B string, your second finger on the second fret of the D string, and your third finger on the third fret of the G string. You'll play this chord from the open A string, and you'll also use the high open E string. Now for the D minor, you'll have your first finger on the first fret of the E string, your second finger of the B string. You'll play this from the open D string, so you won't need your low E or A string. Now for the last chord, the E minor, you'll have your second finger on the second fret of the A string and your third finger on the second fret of the D string. You'll play this from the low E string, and you'll also use your open B and open high E strings. Now I'll play through this progression so you'll know exactly what to do. So far, we've only covered one pattern of the pentatonic scale. However, there are 5 patterns to learn. This is going to help you with fretboard navigation, learning all of the notes up and down the neck. So I'm going to review the first pattern for you, then we'll move on to the other 4. In the key of A, we'll be starting on the 5th fret, low E string. That's the note of A. Moving up to the 8th fret, that's the C note, played with the 4th finger. Moving up to the A string, we play the D note, which is played with the 1st finger, 5th fret. Then 7th fret, A string with the 3rd finger. Moving up to the D string, we play the 5th fret with the 1st finger. That's the note of G. Moving up to the 7th fret of the D string, we play the A note. Moving up to the G string, play the 5th note, and once again we play the 7th note of the G string. Moving up to the B string, we play the 5th fret, that's the note of E. 8th fret, that's G. Moving up to the high E string, that's the 5th fret. And moving up to the 8th fret, that's the note of C. That's the first pattern. Now we'll take a look at the second pattern. This starts on the 8th fret of the low E string. We play this with the 2nd finger. That's the C note. The 2nd note is played on the 10th fret of the low E string. That's the D note. Moving up to the A string, we play the 7th. That's the note of E. Then we play the 10th fret. That's the G note. Moving up to the D string, we play the 7th fret there, that's the note of A. Moving up to the 10th fret on the D string, that's the note of C once again. Moving up to the G string, we play the 7th and the 9th fret, that's the notes of D and E. Then moving up to the B string, we play the 8th and the 10th fret, that's the notes of G and A. And moving finally for this pattern up to the high E string, we play the notes of C on the 8th fret, and on the 10th fret on the E string, the note of D. We'll now move up to the third pattern. This starts at the 10th fret on the low E string. Play this with the 1st finger. The next note is the E note, located on the 12th fret. Moving up to the A string, it's the same shape. We play the note of G and then A, played with the 1st and 3rd finger. Same shape on the D string here, and that's the note of C and D. That's the 10th and 12th fret. Moving up to the 9th fret of the G string, that's the note of E. Next note is the G on the 12th fret, G string. Moving up to the 10th fret with the 1st finger, we play the note of A. Then we play C on the 13th fret of the B string. Moving up to the high E string, we play the note of D with the 1st finger, and then the note of E on the high E string on the 12th fret. Now we're going to move on to the 4th position. This starts from the 12th fret on the low E string. We play this note with the 1st finger. That's the E. We then play with the 4th finger the 15th fret. That's the note of G. Moving up to the A string, we play the 12th fret with the 1st finger. That's the note of A. Then we play the 15th fret with the 4th finger on the A string, that's the note of C. Then we play the first finger plays the 12th fret on the D string here. Then we play 14th fret on the D string here with the 3rd finger, that's the note of E. Then we play the 12th fret on the G string, that's the note of G. third finger plays the A note on the 14th fret of the G string. Moving up to the B string, we play the 13th fret, which is the note of C. Moving up to the 15th fret, we play the note of D. Moving up to the high E string here, play the E note on the 12th fret of the E string. And finally, for this pattern, we play the note of G, which is on the 15th fret of the high E string. Now we'll look at the last position. This starts from the 15th fret of the low E string. Now I'm going to play this one just with my first and third fingers for all strings. You'll find this a little bit easier because it gets a little cramped up here. We're going to start on the 15th fret, low E. Then we're going to play the A note, which is located on the 17th fret of the low E string. Then we're going to play the 15th fret of the A string, that's the C note. Then we're going to play the 17th fret, that's the D note. Moving up to the D string, we're going to play the 14th fret, that's the E note on the D string. Then the 17th fret, which is the G note on the D string. Then we're going to play the 14th fret of the G string here, that's the A note. Moving up to the 17th fret, that's the C note there on the 17th fret of the G string, and moving up to the B string here on the 15th fret, that's the D note. 17th fret is the E note. And finally, for this pattern, we're going to play the 15th G note there and the 17th on the high E string there, which is the A note. And that's all 5 positions, the A minor pentatonic. Now we're going to look at the lower fingering of the 5th position of the A pentatonic minor scale. Now this fingering starts from the 3rd fret on the G note of the low E string. And moving up to the 5th fret of the low E string, that's the A note. On the A string, we play the 3rd fret, that's the C note with the 1st finger, and the D note with the 3rd finger there. Moving up to the 2nd fret of the D string, we play that E note with the 1st finger. Play the G note there with the 4th finger on the D string. It's a little wider fingering than your higher position. Same on the G string here, we're at the 2nd fret, that's the A note. Moving up to the C note here, it's played with the 4th finger. Moving up to the D note here, that's played with the 1st finger on the B string. Then the E note, 5th fret of the B string, it's played with the 3rd finger. And finally, on the high E string, we play the G note with the 1st finger, it's at the 3rd fret, and the A note, which is played at the 5th fret of the high E string. That's the low position of the A minor pentatonic, the 5th position. Now I'll play through all 5 positions for you. Second position. Third position. Fourth position. Finally, 5th position. I'll play this in the lower fingering also. here's the 5th position, lower fingering. That's all 5 pentatonic positions in the key of A. Now you've learned all 5 positions of the A minor pentatonic scale, it's a good idea to start to join them all together. Now you can do this by finding, for example, the same 4 notes in 3 different positions. I'll play that for you. Now we're going to look at the blues scale in the key of A. This scale is very similar in shape to the A minor pentatonic scale. So I'll play this 1 note at a time so you can see exactly what's happening. We're going to start at the 5th fret on the low E string. It's the A note played with the 1st finger. Moving up to the C note, that's played with the 4th finger there on the 8th fret, the low E string. Moving up to the A string, that's the D note, played with the 1st finger. That's the 5th fret, A string. This is the different note. That's the D sharp or the E flat, played with the 2nd finger at the 6th fret of the A string. Next note is the E, played at the 7th fret of the A string. Moving up to the 5th fret of the D string, that's the G note. Next note is the A string on the 5th fret of the D string, that's played with the 3rd finger. And moving up to the G string, that's the C note, played with the 1st finger at the 5th fret of the G string. Next note is the D note there, that's played with the 3rd finger. Here's the extra note played again with the 4th finger at the 8th fret of the G string. So far we have this. The next 2 strings are identical to the A minor pentatonic scale. That's the 5th fret, E note, G note played with the 4th finger, A note played with the 1st finger, and the C note played at the 8th fret on the high E string. So to recap, here's that scale again. That's the A blues scale. Now we're going to look at the A natural minor scale. This fingering is a little bit more complex compared to the last 2 patterns we've covered. So I'll run through it 1 note at a time so you'll know exactly what to play. Starting at the 5th fret with the 1st finger, that's the A note. Moving up to the B note at the 7th fret, that's played with the 3rd finger. C note, which is played with the 4th finger at the 8th fret of the low E string. Moving up to the A string, we play the 5th fret, that's the D note. 7th fret, that's the E note. 8th fret, that's the F note. Moving up to the D string, we play the 5th fret with the 1st finger, that's the G note. Moving up to the 7th fret, that's the 8th note with the 3rd finger. Now moving up to the G string, we start at the 4th fret with the 1st finger, that's the B note. 5th fret with the 2nd finger, that's the C note. 7th fret on the G string, that's played with the 4th finger, and that's the D note. Moving up to the B string, 5th fret with the 1st finger, that's the E note. F note is played at the 6th fret, that's played with the 2nd finger. 8th fret, that's the G note, played with the 4th finger. Moving up to the high E string, we play the A note with the 1st finger. 7th fret, once again that's the B note, and the C note, played with the 4th finger, 8th fret, high E string. I'll run through that scale so you can hear what it sounds like. That's the A natural minor scale. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about advancing. Up until now, you've been learning your electric guitar sitting down, but at some stage, you'll definitely want to learn standing up. To do this, you'll need a strap adjusted accordingly, so you're nice and comfortable standing up. It'll be a good idea to repeat some of the chords and scales we've covered earlier in the DVD while you're standing up. At first, this is going to appear rather strange and awkward, but after some time, you'll certainly get the hang of it. While you're standing up, you want to avoid such bad habits as leaning over and bad posture. This is going to lead to fatigue and tiredness in your shoulders and arms. When you're standing up, you'll probably be thinking about playing with others. The most important musician you can find to play with is a drummer, and this is going to help you no end in developing a great sense of timing and overall confidence playing your electric guitar. Improvising in music is the ability to make up solos and phrases within an established vocabulary. In this case, we're talking about making up a solo involving the E minor pentatonic combined with the E blues scale. Now what I'll be doing is I'll be playing a solo, making one up, along to a backing track of the 12-bar blues in E, which we covered earlier in the DVD. Now we're going to look at some very essential electric guitar techniques. These techniques are very important in helping you achieve a great electric guitar sound. When you start playing with other musicians, the chances are you'll be playing with another guitar player. So it's always a good idea to learn how to construct two entirely different guitar parts. So at this section of the DVD, we're going to look at heavy and light chords. I'll be playing along with the backing track with two different versions of the same four chords. Now the four chords we're going to be using for this track are E minor, G, D and A. Now first of all, I'm going to show you the voicings for the heavy chords. And that is E minor. Have your second finger on the second fret of the A string, your third finger on the second fret of the D string. Now for this chord, we'll need the open low E, the open G, the open B, and the open high E string. The next chord we're going to use is the G. To play this chord, have your first finger on the second fret of the A string, your second finger on the third fret of the low E string, your third finger on the third fret of the B string, and your fourth finger on the third fret of the high E string. Now this chord uses the open D and the open G strings. The next chord is the D chord. you have your first finger on the second fret, the G string, your second finger on the second fret of the high E string, and your third finger on the third fret of the B string. And we play this chord from the open D string. So once again, we don't need the A or the low E string. Now the final chord, we're going to use an A chord, but we're going to use the second voicing we covered earlier in the DVD, which is from the open A, and our first finger covers the second fret on the D string, the G string, and the B string. And that's the chord we'll be using for the heavy chords track here. Now I'm going to play along with a backing track so you'll hear how the two guitar parts sound together. Now I'll be showing you light versions of the same chords, E minor, G, D and A. I'll play these over a backing track which will feature the chords I showed you previously, which was the heavy chords, so you can see how the light chords work with the heavy chords. This is how you play the light chords. We're going to start on the 7th fret of the high E string with the first finger. Then we're going to play with the second finger the 8th fret on the B string, and then with the third finger on the 9th fret of the G string. And that's the high version of your E minor chord. Next is the G chord. This is exactly the same as a D shape, except we're going to be playing this from the 7th fret. So this chord is played with your first finger playing the 7th fret G string, your second finger playing the 7th fret on the high E string, and your third finger playing the 8th fret of the B string. But we don't use the open D string in this case. So we'll play this like this. That's the light version of the G chord. Next is the D chord. And to play this, we're going to start with our first finger on the high E string 5th fret. Then our third finger is playing the 7th fret, the G string, and our fourth finger is playing the 7th fret of the B string. That's the high version of the D chord. The A chord is played with our first finger covering two strings at the 5th fret, and that is the high E and the B string. Our second finger will then play the 6th fret of the G string, and that is the high version of your A chord. And that's how you play the light versions of E minor, G, D and A. Now I'm going to play these light chords with the backing track. We're going to look at some lead guitar techniques. We're going to start with the hammer-on. Now this technique involves two notes. We pick the first note, but we play the second note without actually picking it. And this is done by hammering on with the left hand. So what I'm going to do for the hammer-on here is play the G note, which is on the 5th fret, D string, and I'm going to hammer on to the 7th fret with my third finger. Now that's done just by forcing the note to sound. If you just put your finger on the note, you'll get this. You won't get a sound. So you need to really push into that note to get a sound. Now the pull off is exactly the opposite. And what we're going to do here is we're going to pull off from the 7th fret on the G string. We're going to pull off to the 5th fret. And we need to make sure that our first finger is down. So it's really important to keep your fingers on the neck at this time. And that's done almost by a little flicking motion of the 3rd finger there. Now we're going to look at string damping. Normally your D chord would sound like this. But with string damping we get the chance to change the actual tone of the guitar by using this part of the hand against the bridge, where we can slightly mute or muffle the sound of the strings. And that will give you this type of sound. This is a great technique should you want to add colour to your rhythm techniques. Now we're going to look at bending. This is probably very difficult to start with, but what it involves is changing a note in the scale to usually the next note up in the scale. For example, we're going to bend D to E in A minor pentatonic. I'm just going to run up to the note, then I'm going to bend it. Now that's the note we're going to aim for by bending the note on the 7th fret of the G string, which is the D note, and we're going to bend that up to the E note. Which brings us on to vibrato, which is adding a little bit of personality to the bend. And how you achieve this is probably from the fingers and the wrist. Where you get to re-release and restate the bend, so you get a really nice sound there. Another technique is sliding, and this is where we get to change the pitch of a note, but from sliding from one to the other, like this. And what I did there was with my first finger slide on the G string from the 7th fret to the 9th fret. Now finally, probably the most difficult lead guitar technique is the ghost bend, and this is where you have to bend the note to pitch without actually hearing it and without actually playing it. So I'm going to try and do that for you now. We can release that to the original note and pull off to the C note there. I'll do that again once more for you. That will take a little while to get the hang of, so be persistent. Now we're going to look at some equipment you'll be using as an electric guitarist, from the amplifier to some of the effects you'll be using, namely overdrive, chorus, reverb and delay. With the settings on the amplifier, I set everything to 12 o'clock, and from there I adjust it accordingly, depending on the sound of the room I'm playing in usually. Now we're going to look at the overdrive effect. This effect will give you a great boost when you're playing your solos or an important part of the song which you want to be louder. So I'll demonstrate this effect for you right now. This is the effect without the overdrive. So if we want to improve that sound or increase it in volume, we turn that on with our foot right here. As you can see, that effect greatly improves your sustain. Now moving on to the chorus effect. This is a nice effect which can soften up your guitar sound. What this does is almost simulate that of an acoustic guitar sound. Now we'll look at the reverb effect. This can add echo to your sound, not to be confused with delay, which will give you a repeat. And we'll look at delay right after this. Here's what a reverb effect sounds like. Gives a nice fatness to your sound. Now moving on to delay. This effect should be used with great care because what it does is essentially repeat what you play, even your mistakes. So we'll have a look and see what this sounds like. I'm going to play an E chord here and you can hear it repeated after I play it. Now that's a great effect just for a solo piece. Brian May from Queen uses this to great effect. I'll play something which will use the delay effect. Now you have to use that effect with great care. Today we've covered a lot of material, so it's important to put all this material into a coherent practice schedule. Number one, you should always be warmed up, so use the 3/4 exercises, the pentatonic scale and the major scale we covered earlier in this DVD. Chord changes will help you with your rhythm playing, so it's important to learn about 2 new chords every day. Again, with scales, it's important to play these in all positions. Finally, always try to learn new songs. And if you're learning songs that you really love, you're guaranteed to improve on the guitar. Well, that concludes the Simply Electric Guitar DVD. We've covered a lot of stuff today, but you can always review the DVD at any time. So I'd love to thank you for your time. Never stop learning, have fun, and always enjoy your electric guitar. Take care. Goodbye.